Okay, so today we're going to be talking about trapezoids. And so in our four-sided figure situation, we've been talking about all sorts of shapes like parallelograms and rectangles and rhombuses. Um, and our next thing to talk about would be trapezoids. And so the definition of a trapezoid is that there's exactly only one pair of parallel sides. If it had two pairs of parallel sides, it'd be called a parallelogram. But because only one pair of parallel sides, it's going to be a trapezoid. So it can't have two, it has to have just one. Okay. And so it can't have zero, it has to have just one pair. So the two sides that are parallel are called the bases. Now, they may not be on the bottom. A lot of kids are like, it's got to be on the bottom. No, the two sides that are parallel to each other are called the bases. Okay. And the two sides that are not parallel are called the legs. Okay. So the bases are the sides that are not parallel. The legs are the sides that are not parallel. Okay. So, and you've seen, in a right triangle, the legs are the ones that meet at a right angle. The hypotenuse is the one that is not going to be meeting at the right angle. So, we use the word legs in isosceles triangles as well, but we're going to focus on trapezoids today. So, anyway, the legs are the not parallel sides. The base angles are going to be um, the angles that are between the base and the leg. So these two angles are the base angles, okay? And then these two angles are also base angles. So those are four base angles. Now, I'm making them green because that's what we're going to call them, okay? If you have an isosceles triangle, the base angles will be congruent to each other. There will be two pairs of them. If it's not isosceles, meaning the legs are not congruent, they're just called base angles. Okay. Um, Now here's the deal. Because the top, these two sides and the bottom, if those guys are going to be parallel, um, remember the alternate interior or the same side interior angles will be supplementary. So this one plus this one here will make 180 degrees together. Okay. And so if that's 80 down here, I couldn't get it to go closer. So if that's 80, this will be 100. And then over on the other side, because of same side interior, okay, again, thinking about if the top and the bottom are parallel, then this could be a transversal. These two angles right here will be supplementary. So if that's 95, then this will be 85 down here because the sum of them will make 180 degrees. Okay, these two angles together make 180. So, now we spoke about this a couple times already. An isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid where the legs are going to be congruent to each other. The parallel sides can never be congruent to each other because if they were, then you would have actually a parallelogram. Okay, so if the parallel sides were actually congruent to each other, then you'd have a parallelogram. So the parallel sides can never be congruent to each other in a trapezoid. But if the legs are congruent to each other, then we call it an isosceles trapezoid. And then if you have an isosceles trapezoid, then these two angles will be congruent to each other, those two base angles, and then these two base angles will be congruent to each other as well. And then it also works backwards. If the base angles of a trapezoid are congruent to each other, then you have an isosceles trapezoid. Now think about this. Say that this right here is 80 and this right here would be 80. Well, these two still are going to be supplementary. That would be 100, and that would also be 100 degrees. Okay, so isosceles trapezoids are kind of cute in terms of the base angles across from each other will be congruent, and then again, same side interior will be supplementary. Okay, moving forward. Pardon me as I yawn. All right, here we go. If a trapezoid is isosceles, then the diagonals will be congruent. Okay, so if it's not isosceles, the trapezoid's diagonals will not be congruent. So, like on this one right here, those two diagonals will not be congruent to each other. Okay, notice one will be considerably longer than the other one. But if it's squared up, then the diagonals will be congruent to each other. Meaning, if the legs are congruent, the diagonals will be congruent as well. So DB will be congruent to AC. Okay. Now more vocab. A mid segment is if you look at the leg and you find the halfway point. Okay. And then if you look at the other leg, okay, and then you find the midpoint of that. Now notice this is not isosceles, so you don't have the legs congruent to each other. But if you just find the midpoint of each leg, whether or not they're congruent, find that midpoint here and here and connect them, you call this segment a mid segment. Okay, it's midway between the two parallel sides. Okay, so the deal is this: if you want to find the length of the mid segment, okay, again, the mid segment is formed by the midpoint of each leg. So this matches this one matches this one. Find the midpoint of each side. To find this length, you take B1 plus B2 and divide it by 2. B1 is the top leg. The B2 is the other leg. I'm lying. The bases, take the two bases that are the sides that are parallel, you add them up and divide by 2, and that'll give you the length of the mid segment. And so if you find the mid segment here and connect these, it will be parallel to those other two parallel sides. And the length will be 12 plus 15 over 2. That's going to be 27 over 2. And 27 over 2 is 13.5. Okay, so that's kind of cute. Now on the back, we're going to be talking about the measurements of both isosceles trapezoids and just trapezoids. Okay, so this one is isosceles. Okay, so isosceles means the legs are congruent, the non-parallel sides. If JML is 130, so JML is down here, and that's 130 degrees. And KN is 6.7. Okay, so that's this part right here, so K to N. And then M to N is going to be 3.6. On each measure. So we want MJK. So if you go to M to J to K. Okay, so we want this angle right here. All right, well, we know this angle down here. We're trying to find this one up here. Well, these two sides are parallel. These are going to be same side interior, so they're going to be supplementary. So if you're going to do 180 minus 130, we're going to get 50 degrees to be up here. And we want KLM. Okay, so let's find that one. Let's do from K to L to M. Okay, that's going to be right here. And that will be 130 as well, because this is isosceles. If these two sides are congruent, then these two base angles will be congruent to each other. And then the top two angles will also be congruent to each other. Okay, so and so this is going to be 130 degrees. And then JL. Okay, J to L is all the way from here over here. Well, in an isosceles trapezoid, the diagonals will be congruent. So this diagonal here is the sum of 3.6 and 6.7. So if you take 3.6 and 6.7. You get 10.3, and that's in centimeters. Since the diagonals are congruent, if the one diagonal is 10.3, the other one will also be 10.3. So in an isosceles trapezoid, not only are these two angles going to be supplementary, but also the base angles across from each other will also be congruent. Okay, and so that's why we have the matching of those, and the diagonals will be congruent. Okay, so the next thing is we're talking about mid-segment. Okay, so if this is the midpoint of the leg, and this is the midpoint of this leg over here, well, then we call this length right here a mid-segment. And so to find it, you add the two parallel sides together, the bases, and divide by 2. And so if HJ is 32, and then LK is 60, to find the length from M to N, okay, this is called a mid-segment. We're going to do 32 plus 60, and that is going to be 92, and we're going to divide it by 2. And we're going to get 46, and that's going to be inches. Okay, and then this one, HJ is 18. Again, this is the midpoint of each leg, and so we're going to call the length from M to N the mid segment. They tell us MN is 28, and we have to find X. So 18 plus X over 2 equals 28. So to solve this one, you can cross multiply, and you can set this diagonal equal to the product of this diagonal. And then you're going to get 28 times 2 is going to be 56 equals 1 times 18 plus x is going to be 18 plus x minus 18 from both sides. And you're going to get x is equal to 38, and that is going to be in feet. Okay, this is an isosceles trapezoid. Okay, so if isosceles trapezoid, who will be equal? The legs, the non-parallel sides. That means that 2x minus 8 has to equal x plus 13. So minus x to get all the x's to one side. X minus 8 equals 13. Add 8 to both sides. And x is equal to 21. And x equals 21. And the length from A to B is going to be 21 minus 10, or 11. And that is going to be inches. And notice that down here they used inches. All right. Then we've got 2 left. This one says the measure of angle A is 95. Okay, that's my cat. Good morning. Hi, sweetheart. Hi. And then we've got to find the measure of angle B. Well, the deal is that those are same side interior, so 180 minus 95 is going to give us our answer for 85 degrees. Now, we don't know it's isosceles, so we don't know really anything about these two angles right here, but we do know that their sum makes 180, but that's all we know. We don't know that they match the ones across from, because we don't know if it's isosceles. This one says angle A is 100 degrees. Let's mark that in there. And then we know that angle C is going to be 50 degrees. Okay, so we can mark that here. We don't know if this is isosceles. Okay, we can't go by looks, but we do know that these two angles here are supplementary. So this has to be 80. And we know that these two are supplementary. So this is going to be 130. And so angle D is going to be 80 degrees, and angle B is going to be 130. So with isosceles right triangle, or not isosceles, with isosceles triangles, we know that the legs are going to be congruent. With mid segments, we know that it's the sum of the two bases divided by 2. With any of our trapezoids, we know that same side interior will always be supplementary. So look, make sure you guard this and say, okay, if these two sides are parallel, then these two angles together make 180, and then these two angles together make 180. Okay, and even if it's on its side, these two sum together make 180, and then these two sum together make 180. So Remember, same side interior. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. See if I can turn off this video.